The causes and consequences of the 5-day fighting between Israel and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ, militants in Gaza that killed 33 Palestinians and 2 Israelis. The latest escalation of violence in Gaza began on Tuesday, May 9, when Israeli jets killed 3 top commanders of the PIJ militant group in a targeted strike. Israel said the commanders were responsible for previous rocket attacks on Israeli towns and cities, and that they were planning more. The PIJ vowed revenge and launched a barrage of rockets at Israel, triggering a cycle of retaliation and counter-retaliation that lasted for 5 days. The PIJ is the second largest militant group in Gaza, after Hamas, which rules the coastal enclave. Unlike Hamas, which has maintained a fragile truce with Israel since a 10-day war in 2021, the PIJ is more radical and does not recognize Israel's right to exist. It is backed by Iran, which provides it with weapons and funding. The PIJ has often acted independently of Hamas, challenging its authority in provoking Israel. The 5-day fighting was the most intense since the 2021 war, and posed a serious threat to regional stability. More than 1,200 rockets were fired from Gaza at Israel, some reaching as far as Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Israel responded with more than 200 airstrikes on Gaza, targeting PIJ command centers, rocket launching sites, and hideouts. The airstrikes killed at least 33 Palestinians, including 6 senior PIJ leaders and 13 civilians. Among the civilians were children as young as 4 years old and women. 2 Israelis were killed by rocket fire, and dozens were wounded. The fighting also sparked protests and clashes in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, where Palestinians expressed solidarity with Gaza and anger at Israel's actions. Israeli forces killed 2 Palestinians in separate raids in the West Bank during the fighting. The violence also strained relations between Israel and its Arab neighbors, especially Egypt and Jordan, which have peace treaties with Israel. Both countries condemned Israel's airstrikes on Gaza and called for an end to the hostilities. Egypt played a key role in mediating a ceasefire between Israel and the PIJ, which took effect late on Saturday night. The ceasefire was welcomed by the United Nations and other international actors, who urged both sides to respect it and avoid further escalation. However, the ceasefire did not address the root causes of the conflict, such as the blockade of Gaza by Israel and Egypt, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, the lack of a political solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and the influence of Iran in the region. The ceasefire also did not involve Hamas, which could complicate its implementation and enforcement. Therefore, the risk of another flare-up remains high, unless there is a serious effort to address these issues and create a lasting peace. Egypt played a crucial role in mediating a ceasefire that took effect on Saturday night and ended the hostilities between Israel and Hamas, the group that governs Gaza. Egypt helped broker the May 21 ceasefire to halt the worst fighting in years that killed 253 Palestinians and 12 Israelis. Egypt also sent 2 delegations to Gaza and Tel Aviv to ensure implementation, monitor the ceasefire, and discuss the next steps. Egypt's mediation efforts were motivated by several factors, including its desire to improve its regional standing, restore its influence on the Palestinian issue, and enhance its relationship with the new U.S. administration. Egypt tried to prove to Washington that it can still handle the Palestinian file and that it is willing to follow the U.S. guidance in this regard. Egypt also wanted to leverage its relationship with Hamas, which it considers a threat to its security and stability, as well as a proxy of the Muslim Brotherhood. Egypt's Foreign Minister Sami Shoukry received his Israeli counterpart in Cairo on Sunday to build on a more permanent ceasefire. Later, the country's intelligence chief Abbas Kamel visited Israel and then traveled to Gaza to meet Hamas leaders, the first visit since 2017. Egypt is now actively engaged in efforts to prevent a renewed confrontation, conclude a prisoner exchange, and play a central role in further associated arrangements. Egypt's role during the Gaza war was different from its position during the 2014 war, when it aligned with Israel and maintained a cold and hostile relationship with Palestinian factions. This time, Egypt adopted a more supportive stance towards the Palestinians, condemning Israeli violations in Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa Mosque, summoning the Israeli ambassador to Cairo to protest, and delivering a powerful speech at an emergency Arab League meeting. The mainstream Egyptian media also changed its tone regarding the events in Gaza, expressing sympathy for the Palestinian cause and criticizing Israel's aggression. Egypt's role in securing the Gaza ceasefire was welcomed by world leaders, who praised its diplomatic efforts and leadership. U.S. President Joe Biden thanked Egypt for its successful diplomacy and said he would work with Cairo and other partners to ensure humanitarian assistance reaches Gaza. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres also expressed his gratitude to Egypt for its role in achieving the ceasefire and called for a serious dialogue to address the root causes of the conflict. The challenges and opportunities for peace in the region, especially the involvement of Hamas, the militant group that controls Gaza, and the political situation in Israel. The recent ceasefire between Israel and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ, has brought a temporary halt to the violence that erupted in May 2021, when Israel launched air strikes on Gaza, targeting PIJ commanders who had planned attacks. PIJ responded by firing rockets at Israeli cities, killing one Israeli civilian and wounding 5 others. At least 33 Palestinians in Gaza were killed, about half of them civilians, and 147 were wounded. The ceasefire was brokered by Egypt, which has played a key role in mediating between Israel and the Palestinian factions in Gaza. The White House also welcomed the truce and thanked Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani for their efforts. However, the ceasefire is fragile and does not address the underlying causes of the conflict, such as the blockade of Gaza, the Israeli settlements in the West Bank, the status of Jerusalem, and the rights of Palestinian refugees. Moreover, the ceasefire does not involve Hamas, the militant group that controls Gaza and has fought 3 wars with Israel since 2008. Hamas did not participate in the latest round of fighting, but it has not renounced its armed resistance against Israel and its goal of establishing an Islamic State in Palestine. Hamas is also facing a political challenge from PIJ, which is backed by Iran and has a more radical ideology. PIJ has been trying to assert its influence in Gaza and challenge Hamas's authority. Some analysts believe that PIJ's escalation was aimed at undermining Hamas's efforts to reach a long-term truce with Israel through Egyptian mediation. On the other hand, Israel is also going through a political crisis, as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces corruption charges and struggles to form a coalition government after 4 inconclusive elections in 2 years. Netanyahu has been accused of using the Gaza conflict to divert attention from his legal troubles and to rally his right-wing base. His opponents have criticized him for failing to achieve a decisive victory over PIJ and for allowing Egypt to take the lead in negotiating the ceasefire. The prospects for peace in the region depend on several factors, such as the willingness of both sides to resume dialogue, the role of regional and international actors in facilitating negotiations, and the ability of Hamas and PIJ to maintain their fragile alliance or avoid further confrontation. The ceasefire may offer a window of opportunity for de-escalation and confidence-building measures, but it may also be short-lived and followed by another cycle of violence.